Jax's revenge domain.
So there I was in this conference room when Bradley Thornfield slams this manila folder down on the table. Guy had that fake concerned voice you hear from managers who've been to too many HR workshops. "You're under internal investigation," he says, looking around the room before staring right at me like he just caught me stealing lunch money. Everyone in that room moved away from me like I had some disease. 8 months of coffee breaks and project deadlines just went up in smoke. "My name's Theodore Garrison, I'm 49 and I work for the FBI. But these people knew me as Alan Bradford, investment consultant. What exactly am I being investigated for?" I kept my voice steady, but Dad's old challenge coin was already spinning between my fingers under the table. Unauthorized access to client files, weird data transfers, poking around in accounts that aren't yours. Thornfield read it off like a grocery list. "Pretty serious stuff, Alan. Nobody would look at me." Brenda Walsh, who borrowed my stapler that morning with a smile, suddenly found her notepad fascinating. Carlos Mendoza, who invited me to his kid's soccer game last weekend, stared at his watch like it might explode. "We've been watching you for weeks," Thornfield says, clearly enjoying himself. "Got plenty of evidence." My palm was getting sweaty around the coin. Not from being scared, I was getting ready for trouble. This was happening 3 weeks early. "I'd like to see this evidence." "That's not how this works. Sign this." He slides a paper across the table. "Simple admission you screwed up. We'll walk you out today with 2 weeks' pay, nice and clean." The alternative was hanging there unspoken. Sign or they'd destroy me. And if I don't sign, his smile got nasty. Then things get complicated. Everyone's watching this like a car wreck. These same people who said my work was great yesterday were now waiting to see me get crushed. I reached for my phone. "This isn't a negotiation. Bradford," Thornfield's voice got sharp. "You don't get to call anybody." I ignored him and dialed, "Hello, Agent Ramirez. This is Agent Garrison. The asset verification is blown." I repeat, the asset verification is blown. Thornfield lunged across the table, trying to grab my phone. "What the hell, code yellow at location Sunflower?" I kept going, dodging his reach. "Need backup, now, total chaos." My fake supervisor knocked his chair over trying to get to me. 2 managers ran for the door. Everyone else just froze. "He's bluffing." Thornfield yelled, his face turning red. "Security," I stood up. "Am I?" The security guard showed up in the doorway, looking confused. For one scary moment, he started walking toward me instead of Thornfield. Had my signal failed? Was my team not ready? Then I heard boots in the hallway. Federal agents. Nobody move. Thornfield's face went from angry to shocked as a dozen agents flooded the room. My real colleagues, not the strangers I'd been pretending to work with for 8 months. "This is crazy," Thornfield backed away. "We were following standard procedure for employee problems." "Save it," Agent Ramirez said, handcuffs already out. "We heard everything through the wire he's wearing." My coworkers stared at me like they'd never seen me before. I wasn't Alan Bradford from the investment department. As Thornfield got his rights read to him, our eyes met. His had something I'd waited 8 months to see, the realization that he wasn't as untouchable as he thought. This was justice starting for 450 families who had no idea what was happening to their retirement money. But this was just the beginning. Let me tell you who I really am and how this whole thing started. I'm Theodore Garrison, and before I walked into Alpine Financial 8 months ago, with fake credentials and a wire, I was an FBI agent who specializes in financial crimes against veterans. Not what I planned when I left the Army, but life changes your mission. I grew up watching my dad struggle with what he called the money game. Dad did 22 years in the Army, came home expecting his pension and VA benefits to carry him through retirement. Instead, he met some financial advisor who convinced him to put everything into guaranteed high-yield veteran investment opportunities. Dad lost it all. The house, savings, even borrowed against his life insurance. When the advisor disappeared overnight, Dad couldn't handle the shame. Found him in the garage one morning with his old .45 that carved something permanent into me. When complaints about Alpine Financial Services started hitting our office, something about who they were targeting made me pay attention. Hundreds of military retirees reporting strange fees and missing money, small amounts just enough to stay under the radar. Nobody steals just $200, my supervisor said when I first brought up the pattern. They would if they stole $200 from thousands of people, I told him. 3 weeks of looking into it showed us something bigger than we thought. A sophisticated scheme targeting specific veteran groups, older retirees, disabled vets with cognitive problems, and young military families with their first real money. People less likely to question authority or understand financial complexity. The team was skeptical about sending someone undercover. Financial crime investigations usually involve warrants, not wires, but normal approaches had failed with Alpine. They were too careful with their paperwork. We need someone inside, I argued. Someone who can track where the money goes in real time. That someone became Alan Bradford. Recent corporate transfer with solid background and forgettable personality. Perfect for a mid-level consultant job at Alpine Financial's main office. Getting hired was easy. What followed was months of careful work, building my cover while hunting evidence. I get there early, make coffee for everyone, volunteer for extra work. I learned about Brenda's husband deployed overseas and Carlos's pride in his daughter's grades. I became the reliable guy, helpful, trustworthy, invisible, all while secretly documenting the system Thornfield had built. It was brilliant how simple the scheme was. Small fees automatically added to veteran accounts during transition periods. Administrative charges that got applied then partially reversed, leaving tiny percentages behind. Rounding errors that always favored the company. Each method brought in modest amounts that when you multiplied across thousands of accounts produced millions. The money flowed through a maze of internal transfers before disappearing into investment accounts registered to fake companies. The average veteran losing money would never connect these tiny deductions to the luxury cars in the executive parking lot. By month 3, I knew the operation existed. By month 6, I had the key players identified. By month 8, I had mapped the complete money trail. We were supposed to wrap this up next month with enough evidence to put everyone away. Until Thornfield moved up the timeline by announcing my investigation. Turns out routine security scans had flagged my after-hours access patterns. Nothing solid, just enough to raise questions. Thornfield, always protective of his system, decided to get rid of the risk by making an example of me. He'd done it before. 4 employees in the past 6 years had been publicly accused of misconduct, forced to sign away their rights to fight back, and walked out. Perfect way to remove threats while sending a message to everyone else. Don't ask questions. Except this time, he picked the wrong guy. After the arrests, I sat in a briefing room with my real team. The adrenaline crash left me wiped out.
Solid work, Garrison.
Agent Ramirez said, sliding coffee across the table. 8 months of evidence. 23 people identified in the scheme. About $4.2 million stolen from veteran accounts. When do the families get their money back? Asset recovery is already on it. The tricky part will be finding all the victims, some probably never noticed, like Mrs. Dorothy Williams, who came in monthly to question her statement, only to be told she must be remembering wrong. Or Sergeant Daniel Ortiz, who was made to feel stupid when he questioned unusual charges. The elderly couple who couldn't afford medications because their account was mysteriously short every month. The system counted on shame and confusion to keep victims quiet. We'll need your testimony, Ramirez continued. This won't be quick. Financial crimes rarely are. I nodded, already preparing for the long fight ahead. The arrests were just the first shot in a case that would take months to prosecute. What I didn't expect was how the whole thing would change once we started pulling threads. 3 days after the arrests, I was reviewing evidence when Ramirez knocked on my office door. Heads up, Thornfield hired Griffin Perry. Dad's coin did 2 full spins. Perry was a defense attorney known for 2 things, huge fees and destroying witnesses. They're claiming we set them up, Ramirez continued. Filed motions to throw out almost everything we gathered, saying the undercover operation wasn't legal. That's impossible. We followed every rule. Sure we did. But they only need to create doubt. He hesitated. And there's something else. They're digging into your background, your father's situation, saying you had personal reasons beyond doing your job. That was 20 years ago. Perry doesn't care. He's building a story that you twisted evidence because of personal bias. Later that evening, as I left the federal building, a familiar car pulled up next to me. Carlos Mendoza rolled down his window. Agent Garrison, can we talk? Against better judgment, I got in. I didn't know, he said right away, about any of it. I swear. I believed him. Some of us have been questioned. They're making it sound like we should have known, like we were all part of it. His hand shook a little. My wife thinks I could get charged. We have a baby coming in March. If you told the truth, you should be fine. There's something else. His voice dropped. Brenda got a call from Thornfield last week, from jail. He was asking about you, what you looked at, who you talked to. My pulse picked up. What did she tell him? Nothing helpful, I think, but Garrison, he's not the only one making calls. The week before the arrests, there were executives visiting from Westbrook Partners. They spent hours in closed meetings with Thornfield. One of them keeps calling the office, asking about server backups and old files. I thanked Carlos and told him to talk directly to the prosecution team. As he drove away, I called Ramirez. We need to check Alpine's business partners. Someone's getting nervous. 2 days later, our key witness, Alpine's former IT guy who'd agreed to testify about how the fee system was programmed, was found unconscious in his apartment. Gas leak from a broken heater. He survived but had memory problems affecting his technical recall. Just bad luck, the local cops said. The prosecution team disagreed and put our other witnesses under protection. I got enhanced security, including a temporary move to a different apartment. They're desperate, Ramirez assured me. This means our case is solid, but doubt was creeping in. Our careful investigation was under attack from multiple directions. Legal challenges, witness intimidation, media leaks questioning whether we'd done everything right. The worst hit came during preliminary hearings. Perry had somehow gotten internal emails between my supervisor and me from before the operation. Emails discussing my personal interest in the case. Agent Garrison Perry addressed me on the stand. Would you say your judgment about Alpine Financial was impartial and professional? Yes. He pulled out the emails. Perhaps you can explain why you wrote, quote, I've seen this pattern before. It destroyed my family. I won't let it happen to others. The judge let him ask despite prosecution objections. You created an elaborate lie to get inside Alpine, Perry continued. Operated under a false identity for 8 months. Isn't it possible that your desire for justice, or maybe revenge for your father, influenced how you interpreted routine financial operations? No. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence you selectively gathered while pretending to be someone else. By the time I left the stand, damage was done. The defense had painted me as someone with a personal grudge, not a professional agent following evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. The case wasn't lost, the financial records were still solid, but my credibility had taken a hit. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parsing level 3, blue sedan, 10 minutes, come alone. Every training rule warned against such meetings, but something told me this was important. I grabbed my service weapon and took the elevator down. The parking garage was dimly lit and eerily quiet. The blue sedan sat in a corner spot. Engine off. As I got close, the driver's door opened. Brenda Walsh stepped out, looking nothing like the friendly coworker I'd known. Her face was drawn, eyes constantly checking for threats. I shouldn't be here, she said without any greeting, but I can't stay quiet anymore. I keep seeing Mrs. Reynolds' face, the old woman who came in crying last year because her account was short for the 3rd time. Thornfield had me tell her she must be confused. I believed him then. Her voice cracked. She died 2 months later. Her son came in to close her account and mentioned she'd been skipping heart medication because she thought she couldn't afford it. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. After they arrested you, after they tried to fire you, I started looking more closely at the accounts I handled. The patterns you must have seen. She handed me a USB drive. This was supposed to be destroyed during the system upgrade last week. It's the original programming instructions for the fee structure. With Thornfield's notes, she passed over a notepad. These are dates and times of calls Thornfield made from jail, including 3, to someone named Vincent at Ashford Partners. Ashford Partners was the investment firm we suspected was washing the proceeds, but couldn't prove it. Why are you giving me this? Because I processed the paperwork when Mrs. Reynolds closed her savings account to pay for her husband's funeral 4 years ago. I helped her set up automatic payments for her bills, including prescriptions. I was part of the system that killed her. Her voice got hard. And because yesterday someone left a picture of my house on my windshield, no message, just the picture. After Brenda left, I immediately took the materials to Ramirez. The USB drive had exactly what we needed, direct evidence linking Thornfield to deliberately creating the fraudulent fee system, with notes calculating expected revenue. This changes everything, Ramirez said, and we need to get Brenda protection right now. But when we sent agents to her house, she was gone. Packed bags, phone left behind. Her husband said she'd gotten a call and left immediately, telling him to take their kids to his mother's house upstate. The next morning, Perry withdrew several key motions. By afternoon, 3 defendants had approached prosecution about cooperation deals. They're turning on each other, Ramirez said. Classic response when the evidence becomes overwhelming. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we were winning. The prosecution's confidence grew with each new cooperation agreement. Even the judge seemed increasingly skeptical of the defense arguments. Then Brenda's car was found at a bus station 50 miles away. No surveillance footage, no bus ticket bought in her name, no sign of where she'd gone. Just her empty car with a stack of client statements in the trunk, each marked with highlighting and notes identifying unusual fee patterns. More evidence for our case, but at what cost that night my apartment buzzer rang. Security detail checked the visitor, courier with certified letter needing signature. The envelope had a single sheet with an address in an industrial area outside the city. Tomorrow's date and a time, 9 p.m., no signature, no explanation. Every instinct warned this was a trap. I called Ramirez. Absolutely not, he said after I explained. We'll send surveillance, but you're not going anywhere near that address. I agreed, but something about the precision of the note bothered me. The handwriting looked familiar. At 8:30 the next evening, Ramirez called, surveillance reports abandoned warehouse. No activity, no signs anyone's been there recently. At 8:45, I got a text from an unknown number. Time running out. Vincent knows about Garrison, not just Bradford. My real name hadn't been made public. The connection between Theodore Garrison and Alan Bradford was known only to the investigation team and the defendants. And apparently to whoever sent this message. At 8:55, against direct orders and my better judgment, I left my apartment through the service entrance, avoiding my security detail. I took a taxi to within 3 blocks of the address, then walked weapon drawn. The warehouse looked exactly as described, dark, abandoned, no signs of life. I circled the building once before approaching a side door left slightly open. Inside, emergency lights cast weak light across an empty floor. A single chair sat in the center with a manila envelope. I checked each corner before approaching. The envelope had a USB drive and a handwritten note. The account connections you couldn't find, run. I'd barely processed the last word when I heard the mechanical click of a door locking, followed by the unmistakable hiss of gas. I sprinted toward the exit, already feeling lightheaded. The door wouldn't budge. Consciousness started slipping as I heard distant sirens, then nothing. I woke in a hospital bed with armed guards outside my door. Ramirez sat in a chair by the window, his expression cycling between relief and anger. "You disobeyed direct orders. The evidence would have been worthless if you were dead," he said. "But it turns out to be incredibly valuable. The USB has complete documentation of how Alpine, Ashford Partners, and Pinnacle Trust moved the stolen funds. Account numbers, transaction dates, everything we couldn't establish. Who left it? Unknown. But they also called 911 reporting a gas leak at the warehouse. That's the only reason you're alive. As I recovered, the case against Thornfield got stronger daily. New witnesses came forward, encouraged by the mounting evidence. Former employees revealed how they'd been kept in the dark, each seeing only pieces without understanding the whole operation. But questions remained: who had tried to kill me, who had saved me, and where was Brenda? 3 days before trial was scheduled to begin, Vincent Ashford, CEO of Ashford Partners and alleged endpoint of the money trail, was found dead in his vacation home. Apparent suicide, complete with typed confession admitting knowledge of the fraudulent scheme. Too convenient, too perfectly timed, entirely too suspicious given the timing. The prosecution team worked overnight reassessing strategy. With Ashford dead, certain evidence chains were compromised. His convenient suicide had effectively cut off the investigation's path to potentially bigger players. I was reviewing updated briefs when my office phone rang. Agent Garrison. The voice was electronically distorted, unrecognizable. The operation isn't over. Tomorrow, check the witness list again. Before I could respond, they hung up. The next morning, an amendment to the defense witness list arrived. Brenda Walsh, former Alpine employee, now prepared to testify that unusual account activities were routine industry practices, not fraud. The woman who had provided crucial evidence against Thornfield was now appearing as a defense witness. The prosecution team scrambled to understand this development. Brenda, who had risked everything to provide evidence, was suddenly prepared to testify they were routine practices. "It doesn't make sense," I told Ramirez. She was terrified of these people. She got threats. "People change sides when they're scared enough," he replied. But I could see doubt in his eyes too. The lead prosecutor was more direct. If she contradicts her earlier evidence, our case credibility takes a major hit. That night, my apartment buzzer rang again. Security detail reported another courier delivery. Hotel keycard with room number 714. I recognized the logo, mid-range hotel about 15 minutes away. Against all protocols, but with Ramirez informed this time, I went room 7114 was empty when I entered. Weapon ready. The TV was on, playing local news coverage of the upcoming trial. On the bed lay a phone that started ringing the moment I stepped inside. "You came alone?" I recognized the voice immediately despite electronic distortion. "Yes. Where are you, Brenda? Not important. Listen carefully. Tomorrow in court, I need you to ask me about account verification protocol 16. What's that? Something that doesn't exist. When I hesitate, press me on it. Ask if it was part of quarterly compliance review. Brenda, what's happening? Are you safe? No. None of us are. They have my daughter, Theodore." Her voice cracked, first time she'd used my real name. They've been watching her school for weeks. Yesterday, they sent me a picture of her on the playground with a man standing nearby. The message was clear. "We can protect you both, no. They have people everywhere. The only way through this is to follow their script tomorrow, then destroy them from the inside." The line went quiet for several seconds. "I need to go. Just remember Protocol 16. Make it seem like you expected me to know about it." The call ended before I could ask anything else. The next morning, the courtroom hummed with tension. Media filled the gallery, drawn by high-profile financial crimes and undercover operation drama. The defendants sat in formation, Thornfield in center position, impeccably dressed despite months in jail, flanked by his co-conspirators. When Brenda entered, I barely recognized her. Gone was the warm, slightly overwhelmed working mother I'd known. This woman moved with rigid precision, face neutral, eyes never settling anywhere. Defense counsel called her first. Miss Walsh, you worked at Alpine Financial for 7 years, correct? Yes. During that time, you processed thousands of veteran accounts? Yes. In your professional opinion, were the fee structures at Alpine unusual or outside industry standards? Brenda hesitated for microseconds. No. They were consistent with standard practices. For 40 minutes, she systematically undermined our case, describing the fee system as transparent and appropriate, claiming any irregularities were customer misunderstandings or system limitations. When cross-examination began, the prosecutor started with basic foundation questions, establishing Brenda's role and responsibilities. Then she nodded slightly to me, my cue. I passed her a note with my question. She read it, frowned slightly, but proceeded. Miss Walsh, I'd like to ask about Account Verification Protocol 16. You were responsible for implementing that, correct? Brenda's composure cracked exactly as she'd predicted. She hesitated. I'm not familiar with that protocol, really. It was part of the quarterly compliance review you oversaw. No, She glanced toward the defense table where Thornfield was watching intently. There was no such protocol. Are you certain? Because we have documentation suggesting otherwise. As the prosecutor approached with a manila folder containing blank papers, a bluff, Brenda's hand trembled slightly, reaching for it. For the record, the prosecutor said, this document describes a systematic review process for accounts flagged for unusual fee applications, a process you personally managed. Brenda studied the empty folder, then looked up. Something had changed in her expression. A resolve I hadn't seen before. There was no Protocol 16, she said clearly, but there was a different system, one that Mr. Thornfield required certain employees to implement without documentation. The defense attorney jumped up. Objection. This exceeds the scope, Your Honor. The prosecutor countered. The witness is clarifying her answer about account verification procedures. The judge allowed Brenda to continue. What followed was 2 hours of devastating testimony as Brenda methodically exposed the entire fraud operation, producing handwritten notes she'd kept hidden from both sides. She explained how Thornfield had compartmentalized the operation, ensuring no single employee saw the complete picture, how threats and manipulative bonuses kept questions minimal. And why are you sharing this now? The prosecutor asked. When you previously agreed to testify for the defense, Brenda looked directly at Thornfield for the first time. Because my daughter deserves to see what honesty looks like, even when it's terrifying. When court adjourned, Brenda was immediately taken into protective custody along with her family. The prosecution team was celebrating. That was masterful, the prosecutor told me. How did you know to ask about a non-existent protocol? Just instinct? I lied. 3 weeks later, I stood in the back of a packed courtroom as Lawrence Keller received a 20-year sentence for fraud, corruption, and obstruction of justice. Thornfield and his associates had already been sentenced to terms ranging from 5 to 15 years. But the real victory came after sentencing when the judge announced creation of a restitution fund for all victims. More than 450 military families who would finally recover what had been stolen. 6 months later, I personally delivered restitution checks to veteran families like Sergeant Ortiz, watching disbelief turn to relief. The system Keller had created wasn't just dismantled, it was exposed to its foundations, preventing similar schemes from taking root elsewhere. My revenge wasn't the destruction of individuals, but transformation of a system that had enabled predators for decades. Thornfield, Keller, and their associates lost everything: wealth, freedom, reputations, but more importantly, they lost their power to harm others. They would spend years in prison cells contemplating how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. Not by dramatic confrontation, but by quiet, methodical justice. The kind that would have made my father proud. Look, if you've made it this far, you understand something important. The system only works when good people refuse to stay silent. Every veteran, every retiree, every working family deserves protection from predators who see vulnerability as opportunity. These schemes succeed because they count on shame and confusion to keep victims quiet. But when we shine light on the darkness, when we demand accountability from those in power, justice prevails. If this story means something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear that the little guy can still win. Because that's how we protect each other. One story, one truth, one act of courage at a time.